Dom and Johnny in the morning. All right, so today's listener question comes from Dominic. You're the one that picked today's topic, so I'll let you.
Yeah, no,
Go with it.
not as much of a question as just a conversation, I guess. Especially now, I feel like we're at an interesting point where there's this need to justify your art, and I've been seeing it more and more, and to the point where people are emphasizing the fight aspects of the art more and defining the art as the fight.
Is this like an R system thing? Is this a martial arts?
I think this is across the board.
Okay.
You know, I know I've seen it in our system. I've seen it in other, especially other Kempo related systems. So I kind of wanted to bring up the discussion about Budo, which is, which is the way, the martial way, as opposed to, this being just a 100% learn how to fight system, which I think I would disagree with. I know Master Valar was a very effective fighter, and he wanted to train very effective fighters. But I feel like there's a lot more to this than fight. This is the art's a discipline. So I kind of wanted to just throw that conversation out there. And
just to go back a step, how recent is this shift? Is this something that is past 5 years? Is it past quarter century?
I think this has been a gradual climb, especially with the introduction and the popularity of combat sports.
Yeah.
I think more and more people have been, judging for themselves what they think is a good martial art and what is a bad martial art.
Well, and I'm sure it got accelerated by social media.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So, MMA's been around since before Facebook, but with Reels and TikTok and stuff, it's easier than ever to find a clip that looks kind of silly and be like, this is probably silly.
With absolutely no, background on what they're doing and why.
Well, and also, there is legitimacy in the viewpoint of so MMA, from my understanding, was originally developed to see what actually worked, because there was a time, 70s to 90s, where it was really easy to convince people that stuff would work when you weren't sure if you could. You couldn't see it tested. So that's how, a lot of traditional, kung fu systems and stuff, the way that they were being practiced, it was revealed that it wouldn't work in these circumstances, as is, without getting pressure tested, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean if you practice kung fu, you're not practicing a real martial art, or that it can't be used. It's not fight applicable or anything, but just that, even within our style, every now and again, there's been something I've looked at and I'm like, that seems silly. And that doesn't mean that it's not worth practicing or that there's not worth of value to it, but depending on certain contexts, if you're probably creating a fantasy that you're more effective than you are because it hasn't gone through a pressure test.
I'll actually I'll repeat one of the masters, and I will not say the name because I don't want them to get in trouble, but I thought it was really funny. And they said at least 10% of every martial art is very silly. They used a different word, but it made me laugh. I won't say that master's name, but
well, and I mean, part of it has to be kind of an experimental margin for error, because if you only do the same thing the same way, it's only going to work so long. So this is a real tangent, but Magic the Gathering has a meta where at any one time there might be a certain deck that's dominating, right? But it's only dominating because it works against certain other strategies. Once it becomes the new dominant strategy and everyone starts clamoring for it, then what the professionals do is they try to figure out how to break that new top strategy. And one of the articles I read is that basically the game goes through cycles of strategy. So again, really nerdy, but there are you can boil down all of Magic into 3 big strategies: aggressive, mid-range, and control. And those
Mhm.
3, the reason I'm bringing it up is they have to do with the stages of the fight. So, which happens in the martial arts. So, like, aggressive means you're trying to win as quickly as possible. It's a very aggressive strategy. Mid-range is you set yourself up so that in the middle stages, that's where you're going to perform really well. And
Mhm.
then control is if you can gas them out and take away all their energy, now you can establish, you have all your chess pieces set up to win overall. So, and in a lot of ways, it is interesting. It's kind of like, striking, kicking, grappling. And like it does create a triangle. So aggro beats control, mid-range beats aggro, control beats mid-range.
Mhm.
So basically when one of those 3 strategies becomes dominant, it's also setting itself up to be taken out by another deck. And so that's why, like, of course, the martial arts is going to be 10% silly, because there has to be this experimental phase for, all right, if they're going to do this strategy, I need to be ready to do something weird and unexpected because the unexpected is going to be the thing that gives me the greatest chance to win.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but that doesn't mean that, like, it should be the default. That's why it's 10%, you know?
Master Ken had a story that he used to tell us, and that he was sparring. He was getting his butt kicked from my memory, and I believe it was Master Shirley that said, "Hey, what I want you to do is key eye super loud, jump up in
Yep.
the air, and scissor kick your opponent in the chest."
Yeah.
So 14 combination, and sure enough, the way the story goes, Ken key-eyed really loud,
Yeah.
jumped, and scissor kicked the guy in the chest and got the
Yeah.
point. Yeah, so, sometimes those things just really take your opponent off guard.
It actually happened last night. This is a sparring week in our school, and we had 2 black belts, very close match. They had both great guards. Neither was like able to really get in, and one of them just went ah, and the other one went ah, and that's what led to the point. So absolutely, yeah. Sometimes it's the random stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but also there have definitely been other things in that 10% that are just silly for just they're just silly. Like they just
Yeah,
like
there's
I don't want to
some weird
make it
stuff there.
sound like everything has this hidden value to it. Like there are some things where you're like, I'm probably not going to do that and that's okay.
No, and there's even talking to some of the other martial artists that I hang with from different styles, everyone's kind of on the same page, is knowing that the grandmasters of our respective styles had an uncanny ability to pull off things that a lot of us normal people couldn't pull off.
Yeah.
Like Master Valari is a great example. He could do some crazy stuff. If you watch how people how he would just toss people, and you're just like, I cannot do that.
Right.
He was amazing. And same with some of the other styles instructors. I hang out with some American Kempo people, and they say the same thing about Ed Parker, that like he could pull off things that other people couldn't.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee is a great example too. He could pull off things that other people couldn't.
Yeah.
But I like your analogy with the Magic decks, and I don't really play Magic the Gathering, so I don't know a lot about it, but it does make sense when you think about UFC 1. And granted, whether you think that it was staged and they picked people that they could specifically beat, maybe, but it was a tournament.
Yeah.
And I feel like number one, there wasn't gloves. It was different. There weren't a lot of rules, but it was a tournament, and it was intense. You were fighting multiple people, and now UFC is just super fights, which for those unfamiliar with the term, just means it is one-on-one, and you have months to study your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like the MMA world has shifted to more of a game of study.
Yeah.
In just like Magic, you're studying that deck,
Yeah.
and you're like, how can I beat that deck? And that's what they're doing. They're studying their opponent, watching what they do, and they're like, okay, they tend to do this, I'm going to do this. So they're not becoming well-rounded. They're just trying to tailor their fighting style towards their next opponent, which I'm not going to lie. I'm sure they're absolutely incredible fighters. I mean, you've got to be to get in a ring and duke it out like that.
And be able to adjust yourself to
Yeah.
match somebody else. Like, there's a lot to be said of that. There's been plenty of times I've had someone who's got some sparring talent in our school, and I'm watching them get points scored on them, even though they were talented. And I'm like, make this adjustment, and they're just unable to kick with their left leg instead of their right. So there is something to be spoken of that adaptability.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, kind of rewinding it a bit.
Yeah.
So that was more the fight side. The Budo way is more also about the discipline and the character that goes along with being a martial artist.
Where does that term come from, by the way?
Budo?
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question.
Ooh, time to look it up.
Yeah, I have no idea. I know it's a Japanese term.
Yeah, no, it's just a Japanese term that means that martial arts systems evolve from traditional combat techniques to emphasize personal growth, moral development, and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what we do. Like,
Yeah.
I think if we were to advertise that we produce devastating fighters, I think we'd close our doors. Not because it's not true, right? But also because that's not what people are interested in.
Yeah.
They're like, especially parents, they wanna make sure that their kid is safe, healthy, and happy. So the fighting ability is part of the safety, but another part of the safety is that they're going to make good choices. So, if you're a devastating fighter and you go and pick a lot of fights, well, now you're going to be putting yourself in unsafe situations more often.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's definitely more what we're doing.
Yeah. Protecting yourself and others when you need to, de-escalating, having the skills to de-escalate, having the competence, the quiet competence to de-escalate, because that changes things too.
Yeah.
Just knowing that you could wipe the floor with somebody gives you that confidence where you feel like you can control the situation and you're not scared of what could happen. And I think when you're scared of what could happen, that if an aggressor picks up on that, something that could have been de-escalated might not, because especially if they're a bully and they feel like they could stomp you out, if you appear timid like a victim, that could be it. But yeah, a lot of times the martial arts builds this quiet competence where they're like, I don't know if I want to mess with that guy.
Yeah.
I
will say something else that came to mind when you first texted me about this is something that Master LePan said during the personal that I recorded you doing with him, which is just differentiating between self-defense and fighting. So he put it in a beautiful way, which is self-defense is like a non-consensual engagement. So like it's like, somebody goes to mug you, someone surprises you, you don't want any part of it, but they're bringing the fight to you.
Mm-hmm.
And in self-defense, which to me is actually a little easier than the fight, I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but it's like you're trying to disrupt the other person enough that you can get away. You don't want to finish the fight. You want to do just enough to be as safe as possible and get somebody that can help. A fight is a consensual engagement, meaning that like both people are agreeing to the fact that they're going to be violent. And I think that's the disconnect, is there is something in the middle. Self-defense kind of sits in the middle of those two.
Yeah, and I think the fight is important. And
oh, yeah.
I've had this conversation with my students before that even if you do everything right, a self-defense situation might turn into a fight situation, and it is unavoidable. This is like 0.00001%.
Right.
But it could happen where you end up in a self-defense situation, but what you do did not solve the problem, and now you look behind you, there's no exit. You look in front of you, there's someone that wants to fight. They already know you can defend yourself now, and it's like,
yeah,
hands need to come up, and it's like, okay, we have to do this, unfortunately, because they're not backing down. Maybe there's substances involved,
Yeah, or a weapon,
or yeah,
That's what
yeah.
that's the mindset shift I first teach to when we do any weapons defense is listen, as soon as someone grabs a weapon, they forfeit their right to not leave the situation unharmed.
Same thing with
Like,
hands on neck, I think.
yep,
Yeah, yeah. There's
yeah.
there's a couple indicators where I'm like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
well, and really I think and again, I'm speaking mostly to kids when I'm saying this cuz adults you can be a little more forward.
hmm
I liken it to just a stovetop, just the idea that different meals need different heats. My grandma never figured that out. Everything was on high heat, and man, did it taste crunchy sometimes. But like, if someone calls you a name, that's like a low heat situation. It may
hmm
bother you, but it doesn't require going kung fu on them. But, hands on neck, grabbing a weapon, more than one person is the other one.
yeah.
That's a high heat situation. So you need high heat strategies to match it. Someone grabs you, like it's like a wrist release sort of deal. It's like a medium heat. You
hmm
probably don't need to twin dragon them in the eyes, but they're crossing a boundary by putting their hands on you. So I think that's an important moral distinction, but also a legal distinction, because that's part of self defense too that I think a lot of these people downplay is that, like, there's going to be a legal follow up. And you want to make sure that even if you were able to protect yourself physically now, man, is it a lot harder to protect yourself physically in jail. So,
Oh yeah.
so part of it is how are you training and are you able to match versus, do you go overboard more times than not?
Yeah, yeah, you got to get out of that on and off mindset and
Yeah.
know that there's happy mediums. I've heard so many times people bring up that adage, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. It's like, but what if carried by 6 isn't an option? It's like
Yeah.
I would still rather not be tried by 12.
Right,
You know,
right.
can I stop this before it starts?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's falling on your sword and just apologizing for something that you don't have to apologize for.
Yeah.
So, dude, I am so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to. Like, I was out of line. Even if you weren't, and just taking the high road. And if he still wants to fight, then hey, that's on him.
Right. Well, and that's the biggest thing is the way I put it to my students, especially for at school stuff, but I'm pretty sure it applies to adults too, is you want to make it as easy as possible for the people around you to be on your side so
Mm-hmm.
that when an authority comes around and they're like, what happened? You're making it as easy as possible for them to be like, I don't know, like the other person just started swinging and like they were doing their best to defend themselves, as opposed to like there was some sort of mutual shouting that then devolved into mutual battling.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean it just happened. I'm not going to give too many details, but there was one of our students was literally just chilling in school and a physical altercation happened, but during the aftermath, it was so obvious that the other person started it and kept crossing boundaries into more and more extreme things,
Mm-hmm.
and that the student we had was just basically like defending themselves the entire time and doing everything right. And thankfully, they were unharmed, physically at least. Like, it still shook them a little bit, but like, my point is that, like, part of it is you keep yourself safe physically, but you also want to just be aware of the people around you. And the more you practice this ahead of time and practice the mindset ahead of time, it's like the art. Like the punch is gonna come out however much you've practiced it. The awareness and the way that you energetically match is only gonna happen as well as you practice it ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the part that actually translates to the rest of your life. The fight, not necessarily.
Right.
There's a little bit of a tango with interactions, conversation, but that discipline to know what's appropriate when, and the ability to, as you said, choose your heat. Especially in a business atmosphere. I feel like people who practice the Budo in the martial arts, practice the good character and stuff. They're the ones that can be successful not just in martial arts but in anything. But some people they just practice to fight, and that's who they are. They're a fighter.
Yeah.
that success isn't gonna travel to other things. Maybe the discipline side of it, because all fighters have to be disciplined to some extent.
Yeah.
But I think those who really practice the way of the martial arts, the way of that quiet competence, having that good character in our system is self-control, respect, and self-discipline. I feel like that will translate to just about any field that you go into, any career, and it I mean, obviously doesn't guarantee success, but I think there's a much higher percentage of success in an individual that shows those character traits.
Well, and just defining what success is. So, like, success might be like financially. I remember there was a teacher in high school. I asked that question, and they very firmly were like, "Success is financial. It is measurable. It is how much you are making per year."
Mm.
But sometimes you can be successful by just being a balanced person, regardless of the circumstances that surround you. So, absolutely, like you could be there's always a luck element with other circumstances in your life, but you have choice in helping kind of self-regulate and self-succeed.
Hmm.
So I just think you have to kind of define what the parameters are. But absolutely, yeah. And I will say though that the fight element, like you were having a conversation not that long ago with another instructor who was arguing that they respond to the art side of the martial art much more than the martial. That the martial is a have to, but the art is a get to.
Hmm.
You were saying that you weren't sure if you could really separate the two, that like they're two sides of the same coin. And I am more inclined to agree with you on this, only because it's nice to think of the art side, but the martial side is what allows you to deal with pressure. If you aren't afraid of getting hit, well, then when someone's like, I gotta have a tough conversation with you about your work performance, it's like, oh, okay. Like, it's just one more thing, it's not, learning how to take a hit. So yeah, I think that even the fighting side, there is like necessary development of being okay in uncomfortable situations or intense situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, it's funny. We just had a guest come out to our studio yesterday, and while we were going through the stuff, she was making the point that if you want these techniques to work, you got to hit with a little intent, which we talk about sometimes, but sometimes, we're a little too nice to each other sometimes. And these were black belts, so and so she demonstrated the technique twice, and the first time she was nice, and you could tell it just looked like hands moving. And the second time she added a little intent, and boy, it is different. Because all of a sudden, like, she didn't have to tell me what to do. My body was moving exactly how she wanted it to, because she was hitting me in the ways that were going to make my body do what they wanted to do. And as she does it, as she's hitting me, I'm realizing, it's like, oh, like over the years, I've gotten good at taking punches and yielding just enough to them where it's a nice thump.
Yeah.
But I know how to move in a way where I'm going to be protected. And I'm watching all these black belts hit each other harder than they normally do, and they're all reacting appropriately, and they're all laughing and smiling. And I was thinking to myself, sometimes you forget how resilient people are and how this trains you to be resilient, even with individuals that are, prone to be more emotional. Sometimes it was making confrontation fun.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't trying to hurt each other. We were just having a little bit more intent.
Yeah.
And like you said, with kind of work. What's the word? Evaluations, I guess. Performance reviews. That's what I was looking for. Like with a performance review, sometimes those can be really intense because they are giving you feedback with intent.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like you can't take it personal. You just got to know how to yield and smile and be okay with it and be like, okay.
Power is a great example of it exists on a dial.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely met martial artists, it's either all or nothing. And so part of that is you want to give enough intent. It's like I was actually listening back to one of our episodes where we were talking about the Eightfold Path, and it's like right energy, right? So it's not too much, but it's also not too little. You're trying to find the right, and you can build it up over time. So it's not like you have to go like super intense right away. You have to like ramp it up and give the nervous system time to acclimate and adjust. And it is really interesting how different individuals have different sensitivities. This was a conversational thing, but I was with a few of my instructors, and one of them was reflecting on when he was a much younger teen. And he's like, yeah, I had to have a few sit down, serious conversations with John, and I felt really like bad about myself because I knew I had messed up and everything. And one of them was like, wow, I've never had a serious sit down conversation with John. And I was like, actually, we have. It's just that it didn't seem that way because of how much like where you were at in your life. When you're 21, you're in a very different emotional place than when you're 14. So like it's like it was this I approached it like copy paste the exact same thing almost in the same time period, and how one of them responded was very different than how another one responded. So it's just kind of interesting, like the practice can show up in a lot of ways, and especially for the ones that like just have a higher sensitivity, it's almost better for them because that's what's going to even if it feels intense here, it's still a safe place, which is why it feels fun, right? You're not going to get seriously injured or anything. Dom and Johnny in the morning.